It certainly is important to know about hardware. But you know what? Hardware really isn't all that exciting once you've kind of taken a look at the pieces. They're just little bits of plastic and circuitry and metal that all go together, but they don't do much. Well, in this chapter, we're ready to get started. There's nothing quite like getting logged onto the computer and getting to work, and that's what we'll do. We're going to use the Windows interface in this case to explore how we log onto the computer, what the pieces are, how you navigate around, and we'll even let you customize some things, kind of like when you start to add things to your new house. That way it'll make it your own. When you're finished, you'll be very familiar with what the operating system is, how it interacts with hardware, and how it interacts with you. Even though all of the technicalities about how hardware works can be very difficult, the concept of hardware itself is not difficult because we can actually pick up or touch a mouse, a keyboard, a monitor, and even the CPU or the box. What's a little bit harder to understand is this thing called an operating system, because it really is one of those intangibles. We don't know why we need it or what exactly it's doing for us. So in order to explain this, I'd like to use an analogy. And I'm going to start off with a question, which is, what if you traveled? We know that you speak a language, maybe even more than one. And for our purposes, we're going to say that your primary language is English. But what if you traveled to a different country and you ran into a rural farmer in another country and they speak only his or her language? Maybe they've never been outside of their own town. They don't speak English and they don't speak any of the languages that you happen to speak. So if you traveled to their country and you ran into this person, you don't speak each other's language, how might you communicate? Well, now in a regular class, I love this because we often get into engaging discussions about the fact that you can use body language and gestures and things like that. But the point is, here we're trying to say that you don't speak the same language, and that makes it very difficult. But you could use a translator, and that's what people often do when they travel. Somebody who speaks both your language and the language of somebody else. That would be helpful. When we talk about computer systems, the language that computers speak is called binary. Hardware speaks this language. And the interesting thing is that everything in binary is simply a combination of zeros and ones. Now, I haven't checked recently, but I'm almost positive that you don't speak binary. So then we come into an issue. When the computer wants to see ABC, in binary it sees this combination of zeros and ones representing each letter. I don't speak binary either. As a matter of fact, there aren't very many people in the world who do, but it's a very complicated language. Actually, I shouldn't say that. It's a very simple language. It's just not one that people speak or understand. So if you don't want to learn binary, how do you think you're going to communicate with your computer? Well, fortunately, that's exactly what the operating system does for us. The operating system is the translator. It translates keystrokes, mouse clicks, and sometimes even those voice commands that we've talked about into binary code that the hardware can understand. So if I double-click on something, the operating system says, aha, she double-clicked on a file, that means she wants to open the file, and it translates that into a binary command that the hardware can understand. Isn't that cool? That's what the operating system really does. The operating system can also be commonly referred to as the OS for short. We'll use that because it's a little bit simpler than saying operating system every time. So now we know that the operating system is the translator between the user and the hardware, your input and whatever the computer needs to do. In pure theory, the operating system doesn't really do anything useful. We know that it doesn't send emails and it doesn't do calculations, but it actually does some very useful things, just not typically what users think of. The operating system, though, usually does include a few simple or basic applications. For example, the Windows operating system has always included very simple word processors like Notepad and WordPad. The document that we've used in some prior lessons actually used WordPad, which comes loaded with the Windows operating system. Windows also includes a calculator so that you can do simple mathematical calculations. So they actually aren't part of what we typically consider the normal operating system. They're actually separate applications, but they do come bundled together with the operating system. So, as a consumer, we can just say that when we get an operating system like Windows, it does include some very basic applications that let us do some very simple things with just the operating system without having to buy any other programs or software. Remember, though, that the important thing that it really does is not the calculator or the word processor. It's enabling the hardware components to communicate with each other as well as with the applications and with the users themselves. Some of the things that it does includes managing files and the file system itself. Types of operating systems include Windows, which we're talking about primarily here. Linux, or Linux as it sometimes is pronounced, is also an operating system that works on PCs, and Unix is a system often used in things like government or larger corporations. The Mac also has an operating system. There are some others that are out there as well, but these are kind of the main players at the moment. We're not here to argue or discuss which one is better, which one is best, and which one you should be using. Just know that all of these are operating systems that act as the translator between the user, the hardware, and the software. Operating systems then come in versions and editions. The later versions have updated or new functionality, security, and services. And different editions of the same version often target things and have enhancements that are specified for a particular audience. I've included as examples here some of the Windows 7 operating systems. Now, the vendor is Microsoft, the operating system is Windows, the version is 7, and the editions we can see here include Home Premium, Professional, and Ultimate. The main difference between them is that Home Premium is optimized for home users, so it focuses a lot on multimedia like audio and video. Professional is more business-oriented, so it has some extra things as far as security goes and file encryption. Ultimate really is a combination of the other two. Ultimate has all of the features in it for both personal use as well as business use. You should choose the edition that's most appropriate for you. And I should tell you that the consumer edition, in this case Home Premium, is the one that is usually going to be less expensive. There are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, it doesn't have some of the technical things like security that the others do. But mostly it's because to reach a price point that home users are willing to pay, it needs to be a little less expensive. So for the Windows 7 offering, Home Premium is the least expensive, Professional is in the middle, and Ultimate is the most expensive. Prices do vary, and of course you can get volume licensing and a lot of other things. But for our purposes, just realize that we have Microsoft, we have Windows, we have 7, and then we have the different editions. That's how you understand which operating system you're using. Knowing the actual operating system you're using, though, is just a start. Frankly, we really don't care. What we care about is now how do we use it. And that's what we want to take a look at next, is what do we do with the Windows